Hey, Joe.
Yes?
Are you the kind of guy that would fuck a person in the ass and not even have the goddamn common courtesy to give him a reach around?
Certainly not. Hey, George.
Yes?
Is it true that you're so ugly you could be a modern art masterpiece?
No, I'm not that ugly. Joe?
Yes?
Is it true the best part of you ran down the crack of your mama's ass and ended up as a brown stain on the mattress?
Not at all. Can I ask you a question?
Of course.
If it wasn't for dickheads like you, there wouldn't be any thievery in this world, would there?
No, I think there would still be thievery in this world. Capitalism necessitates that. My turn. Did your parents have any children that lived?
They sure did. George, let me ask you this. What is your major malfunction, numbnuts?
I don't rank my malfunctions. They are all equal in my eyes. Joe, what is the point of this?
Well, we will discuss the film, obviously, but there are so many lines in it that we cannot use that I thought I would sneak in these lines that we could use. I will say this up front, though. I was not prepared for the first half of this movie. I can't believe guys walked out of the theater after watching that nightmare and thought, boy, do I want to be a Marine.
Well, I don't know. If you think about it, becoming a Marine is cheaper than hiring a dominatrix.
Welcome to Does This Still Work? The podcast that always an ass. Does this still work? I'm Joe Dixon.
And I'm George Romacka. And today we're discussing Full Metal Jacket from 1987 and some historical context. First, podcasty stuff. You can reach us at dtswpod@gmail.com, on Facebook, Letterboxd, and on our YouTube channel. Joe is on Blue Sky at joedixon.bsky.social. Please tell your friends about us, even the ones who keep a jelly donut hidden in their footlocker, and leave 5-star ratings everywhere. You can pick what we watch and get extra per episode content by funding us on Patreon for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/dtswpod. Just like Aaron Gray does, which is how this movie ended up on our list.
Yep.
It gets results, people. Paying us money gets results. Pay us money. Now, Joe, take us back to 1987.
A quick question there, George. I want to know. Did you ever hide a jelly donut in your footlocker?
No, I did not, Joe. The only place I ever hid a jelly donut is in my face hole.
Okay. Do you like jelly donuts? I don't. I think they're bad.
I love jelly donuts.
Oh my God, I can't stand them.
They are my favorite donut next to vanilla cream donuts.
I don't like things in my donuts or my cakes. I like them solid. I feel like I'm being cheated.
I know you do.
If they put, creams in them.
Yeah, we've had this discussion. It's weird.
But did we have it online? I don't think so.
Yeah, well, maybe. I don't know.
Who can remember when our conversations happen anymore? Anyway, hey everybody, back to the movie. And back to the history section. In today's movie, Marines frequent prostitutes with no concern about a court-martial. This was not the case for the Marines guarding the U.S. Embassy in Moscow in 1987, the year Full Metal Jacket came out. George, read this headline brought to us by Time magazine.
Booze, brawls, and skirt chasing. The U.S. Marine scandal in Moscow spreads.
In a nutshell, a series of Marines guarding the U.S. Embassy in Moscow during the waning days of the Cold War were accused of sleeping with Russian women, some of them sex workers, and from there did things that compromised security and led to spying. I will quote from the article. Marines were not allowed to leave the embassy compound unless accompanied by another American, and they could not stay out overnight. But Soviet drivers claim they often took Marines to parties at foreign compounds and brought them back as late as 6 a.m. Americans visiting the embassy recall being asked by Marines to escort them past the entrance. One American woman said she twice drove a Marine to visit what he called his Finnish girlfriend, but she said the place was some sort of Soviet institute, so I suspect the girlfriend was Russian. Another way for the Marines to get out was to apartment sit overnight for Americans on vacations. Many embassy staffers remember Violetta Siena, the Soviet receptionist, and Spaso House, the ambassador's residence. She is a Soviet agent alleged to have persuaded Sergeant Clayton Lonetree, 25, to help other agents into the embassy at night and roam the building's most sensitive communications and CIA areas, where the agents planted numerous bugs. Tall, willowy, and slim, with long blonde hair and large eyes, Sienna stood out at the annual Marine Bowl. She was so good looking, said a former Soviet employee. She wore a long, elegant black dress and attracted attention. When the Soviet workers were withdrawn from the embassy, a U.S. diplomat was overheard asking, "What will we do without Violetta? We won't have anyone to look at around here." The Marine house cook, known only as Galena, also made an impression. She allegedly seduced Corporal Arnold Bracey, 21, into working with Lone Tree. One American woman in Moscow recalls a Marine telling her how kind Galena was to them, how thoughtful she was. She went out of her way to teach them Russian and tell them good places to go in Moscow. A former Soviet embassy employee said that Galena was very, very good looking and once complained to a senior U.S. official that the Marines were behaving rudely and making improper suggestions to her. Beyond Lone Tree and Bracey, the wide-ranging investigation into the spy affair produced another arrest last week. Staff Sergeant Robert Stufflebeam, 24, who was the second-ranking Marine at the embassy when the two suspects were in Moscow from July 1985 until March 1986. Was charged by the Navy with failing to report his regular contacts with Soviet women. At least one of these women claimed the source was KGB. He has not, however, been accused of spying. End quote. Okay, so what happened to these guys mentioned? George, read this headline from UPI.
A military jury cleared Staff Sergeant Robert Stufflebeam Thursday.
I will quote. Quantico, Virginia. A military jury cleared Sergeant Robert Stufflebeam Thursday of charges he had sex with Soviet prostitutes while serving as a Marine guard at the U.S. Embassy in Moscow. The jury of 5 officers and 3 enlisted personnel also found Stufflebeam innocent of charges that he lied to investigators and failed to report his alleged involvement with the Soviet prostitutes to his superiors. End quote. Can you imagine a serviceman being charged with going to a prostitute? How many military servicemen would be in prison right now if that actually was something the uniformed services cracked down on? Anyway, Stufflebeam still had to face some more consequences for his actions. George, read this headline brought to us by the Chicago Tribune.
Marine demoted in spy scandal.
I will quote. Marine Staff Sergeant Robert Stufflebeam, a former security guard at the U.S. Embassy in Moscow, was demoted one rank Friday after a court-martial stemming from the so-called Sex Fort Secret spy scandal. Stufflebeam, 25, of Bloomington, Illinois, was never implicated in espionage, but was found guilty Thursday night of 2 instances of frequenting off-limits bars in Moscow. He was acquitted of more serious allegations of violating military regulations by having sex with Soviet prostitutes, failing to report those contacts, and lying to authorities about his sexual encounters. Stufflebeam said he was pleased with the verdict. You have a few agents, or whomever, decide that if one Marine is dirty, they all have to be dirty, he said, calling the investigation a witch hunt. Stufflebeam was reduced a pay grade and demoted from staff sergeant to sergeant, which means he will supervise fewer people and lose about $113 each month in pay. End quote. It sounds like the brass didn't have much of a case. They certainly didn't seem to have had one with the other guy who was mentioned. George, read the headline from the New York Times.
U.S. drops its case against a Marine in embassy spying.
I will quote. Charges were dropped today against a second Marine accused of spying at the United States Embassy in Moscow. The move amounted to an acknowledgement that the government could not prove that crippling security breach occurred at the embassy. The 21-year-old Marine Corporal Arnold Bracey of Queens was freed from the Marine brig in Quantico, Virginia, and immediately accused investigators of coercing his confession and misusing the results of a lie detector test. Charges similar to those against Corporal Bracey were dismissed last month in a case against another Marine guard, Sergeant Clayton J. Lone Tree, although he still faces a court-martial on other espionage counts. The Marine Corps said it had dropped the case against Corporal Bracey because it was unable to corroborate the reported confession he later recanted. At a news conference this afternoon at Quantico, however, Corporal Bracey said he had been coerced into confessing and denied allegations he had sexual contact with a Soviet woman who had been linked to the KGB, the Soviet intelligence agency. He asserted that Naval Investigative Service agents had forced him into a confession by threatening that he would otherwise lose his rights as an American citizen and as a member of the Marine Corps. They told me my life would be over at 21 years old, said Corporal Bracey. I wouldn't have a decent job, wouldn't eat a decent meal. I'm feeling pretty good right now, Corporal Bracey said. I knew I didn't do it. End quote. Now remember, the charges were that these guys were allowing Soviet spies to run wild through the American compound and even allowing them to check out sections that were for CI personnel only. So, this was all bullshit. Was nobody doing any espionage? Well, let's check out Wikipedia for what happened with Marine Clayton J. Longtree. Quoting now, Clayton J. Longtree, a former U.S. Marine who was court-martialed and convicted of espionage for the Soviet KGB, he served 9 years in prison for espionage during the early 1980s. Longtree was a Marine Corps security guard stationed at the Embassy of the United States in Moscow. Longtree is the first U.S. Marine to be convicted of spying against the United States. Longtree, who was stationed in Moscow as a guard at the U.S. Embassy in the early 1980s, confessed in 1987 to selling documents to the Soviet Union. Longtree was seduced by a 25-year-old female KGB officer named Violetta Siena in that year. He was then blackmailed into handing over documents when he was assigned to Vienna, Austria, including the blueprints of the U.S. Embassy buildings in Moscow and Vienna and the names and identities of U.S. undercover intelligence agents in the Soviet Union. End quote. He was initially convicted and set to serve 30 years, but it got reduced to 15 when it was found that, one, his actions only caused minimal damage, and the commandant of the Marine Corps insisted the guy was motivated not by money or by a chance to betray his country, but by being stupid and falling in love with someone who was just using him. It also turns out some of the more serious CIA breaches were not committed by him, but by CIA Mo Aldrich Ames, but that will be revealed later. Longtree was released in 1996 after, as I said, serving 9 years. Okay, George, tell us about Full Metal Jacket.
Alrighty.
Oh, real quick. Have you seen this film before? I don't remember if you ever seen it.
Oh, yes, I'd seen this film. It had been a long time, though.
Okay. I'd never seen it before, so it was quite the head spinner for me.
I believe it.
Oh, boy, does this start off with a bang. But anyway, we'll get into it.
Mm-hmm. This was written and directed by Stanley Kubrick, and this is the podcast's second run-in with this guy. We also saw his work in Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb.
And I've seen his work in 2001, A Space Odyssey, and The Shining. And we've both seen his work in A Clockwork Orange. So we've seen quite a few of Kubrick movies, actually.
Yep, just not for the show.
Just not for the show.
And this was also written by Michael Herr. And for the show, we saw his work in Apocalypse Now.
And I read Herr's 1977 book, Dispatches, which is about his time in Vietnam as a war correspondent. And the book opens like this. There was a map of Vietnam on the wall of my apartment in Saigon, and some nights, coming back late to the city, I'd lay out on my bed and look at it, too tired to do anything more than just get my boots off. That map was a marvel, especially now that it wasn't real anymore. I recommend that book. I enjoyed it when I read it, even though I didn't understand all the references. I think it's just a very fascinating read.
Cool. This is also written by Gustav Hasford.
This movie is based on his book, Short Times, which I never read, but I did read his Wikipedia page. This guy had a habit of taking books out of libraries across the country and never returning them. And it got so bad that an arrest warrant was issued for him. Can you imagine being that bad?
Wow.
The cops actually had to get involved. And I thought that was just an interesting tidbit.
He's on the shit list of the U.S. public library system.
Indeed. Librarians across the country are hot on his ass.
That takes work. Blurbs. IMDb says, a pragmatic U.S. Marine observes the dehumanizing effects the Vietnam War has on his fellow recruits, from their brutal boot camp training to the bloody street fighting in Hue.
Okay, sure.
Sure. Amazon says, a group of Marine recruits travel from the harrowing experience of boot camp to the horrifying battlefronts of Vietnam. Okay, cool. All right.
Sure.
This film about the military decides to get its shaving the heads of the recruits completely bald scene out of the way by making it the first thing that we see. Unlike in Police Academy, the military does actually shave all of your hair off.
How many movies have we seen with that very same shaving head scene? There's a lot of them, right?
Every one of them that includes a boot camp. So Officer and a Gentleman, Police Academy, this movie. Actually, I think that's all of them for this.
So, but you're right. So that wasn't in Buffalo Soldiers, but in every other film that either had the military or any sort of boot camp thing, we've seen a ton of getting their head shaved. By the way, I looked at I like, actually.
Yeah. You wear it well. The next scenes introduce us to these recruits' drill instructor, Gunnery Sergeant Hartman, and some of the recruits that we'll be following through the rest of the movie.
Gunnery Sergeant Hartman is played by R. Lee Emery, who we've seen on the podcast in Seven, and I've seen in X-Men The Last Stand, Dead Man Walking, and Leaving Las Vegas.
And I've seen him in The Naked Gun 33 1/3, The Final Insult, and heard him in Toy Story.
I assume his language is cleaned up for Toy Story.
Yes. The Green Army Men, I think, was his voice.
I am Gunnery Sergeant Hartman, your senior drill instructor. From now on, you will speak only when spoken to. And the first and last words out of your filthy sewers will be, sir. Do you maggots understand that?
Sir, yes, sir.
Bullshit, I can't hear you. Sound off like you got a pair.
Sir, yes, sir.
All right, real quick. The whole I can't hear you thing, stop doing that, everybody. Every rock star, every preacher, every politician on a stage, anybody on a stage, including Mark, my choir director, stop doing that. It's fucking obnoxious.
If you ladies leave my island, if you survive recruit training, you will be a weapon. You will be a minister of death praying for war. But until that day, you are pukes. You are the lowest form of life on earth. You are not even human fucking beings. You are nothing but unorganized, grabastic pieces of amphibian shit. Because I am hard, you will not like me. But the more you hate me, the more you will learn. I am hard, but I am fair. There is no racial bigotry here. I do not look down on Here you are all equally worthless. And my orders are to weed out all non-hackers who do not pack the gear to serve in my beloved corps. Do you maggots understand that?
Sir, yes, sir.
Bullshit, I can't hear you.
Sir, yes, sir.
Again! Okay, you might have noticed the return of the slur chime. If I used the slur chime for every racial slur, every sexist remark, every emasculating remark, every specifically slur against Asian people, this episode would be nothing but slur chimes. So we're going to let those four stand for the rest of the movie to remind us that this movie is full of language that, yes, existed at the time and in that war that nobody should be propagating today.
Not at all. Now, I know, obviously, you joined the Navy well after this time, and it was nothing like this in your boot camp. But I assume they did still sort of like scream at you and and you had to still do the yes, sir, and they did do the yeah, repeat, yeah, oh, I don't hear you. Say it again, sir, yes.
Yeah. Well, a brief history of Marine boot camp abusiveness would be that prior to the Korean conflict, it was less abusive than this. During Vietnam, it was more abusive than this. After this movie came out, it became significantly less abusive than this because the new Commandant of the Marines, General Al Gray, got a preview of this movie, and he didn't believe that breaking down the identities of people made them good soldiers.
And he would have been correct.
Yeah, he wanted soldiers with self-esteem who could make decisions. But to answer your question, yeah, they were a bit verbally abusive. We never got hit. Ever.
Yeah, I was really shocked at that. He wails on people. I couldn't believe it.
Yep. That never happened while I was in boot camp.
And R. Lee Emery's obituary, one of the guys who's worked scene for the show, Jarhead, he said he saw this movie and that made him join the Marines. And in the film, I don't think we discussed it when we saw the film, but in the film, he gets hit by a drill sergeant. Well, not hit. His drill sergeant shoves his face into a blackboard. So apparently the abuse went on for a bit there after Vietnam.
Yep. One recruit decides to do a John Wayne impression for some reason and is rewarded with the nickname Joker. He will be the narrator and central protagonist of the movie.
And Private Joker is played by Matthew Modine, whom we've both seen in The Dark Knight Rises, and I've seen Oppenheimer and The Hotel New Hampshire.
And I've seen in Notting Hill. A few more recruits down the line, and Hartman gets to Private Leonard Lawrence, whose nervous smile and general dumb look earns him the nickname Gomer Pyle after the character in that old TV show.
Private Pyle is played by Vincent D'Onofrio, who we've both seen in Men in Black, and I've seen in The Player and JFK. And of course, he was like a regular on one of the Law and Order series that I didn't watch.
And I've seen him in Jurassic World.
I have to say this, not that familiar with Vincent D'Onofrio, but man, does he play a good, stupid person. I mean, I truly thought something was wrong with him. In some of those scenes where they show him looking at someone, like, oh my God, did they hire someone who was mentally challenged for this? And I thought, no, it's Vincent D'Onofrio, he's acting, but wow, did he look really fucked up.
Yep. Next, the recruits are marching, and Private Joker begins narrating, as he will, throughout the movie.
Paris Island, South Carolina, the United States Marine Corps Recruit Depot. An 8-week college for the phony tough and the crazy brave.
Okay.
Hey, your brother's a Marine. Is he phony tough or crazy brave?
Yes. Their first day of marching, drilling, and obstacle course running is what you usually see in these boot camp movies anyway. The amount of abuse suffered by Private Pyle is probably more than what anybody actually would suffer. In reality, anybody that far off of normal would be sent home under a medical discharge.
Well, even during the war?
Yes.
Okay.
Because the last thing you want is somebody off their rocker in your group with your people. Because they tend to shoot your people.
The drill sergeant doesn't seem to notice that there's anything wrong with him. He likes humiliating him, but I don't get the impression he knows anything's mentally wrong with him. In fact...
Exactly. This is a movie written in part by Stanley Kubrick, and we know what kind of person he is.
Matthew character even goes like, hey, I think something's wrong with him, and no one else seems to have noticed.
Yeah, somebody would have noticed. For their first night in the barracks, they're ordered to sleep with their rifles, as if their rifles were their wives. As they lay in their racks, they are told to hold their weapons and pray the rifleman's prayer that I am not going to sound clip or repeat because I don't fucking want to.
Well, you're never a Marine, so I assume you never had to do anything quite that stupid.
Nope. The next montage shows us how much trouble Private Pyle is having with the physical aspects of this training. He is overweight and weak. When I went into boot camp, I was not overweight. I was just weak. Overweight didn't happen until much later.
Ah. And you didn't get to play with the real guns, right? You got the laser tag.
Yeah, demilitarized M16s. We played laser tag with stationary targets. At night, Private Joker admits to basically being an atheist, and his stick-to-itiveness impresses Hartman. Hartman calls over the current squad leader, nicknamed Snowball, and gives that job to Joker, making it Joker's responsibility to get Private Pyle squared away. Snowball
is played by Peter Edmund, who I know from Octopussy, the worst named Bond movie ever. I'm surprised that even got on posters. How did the ratings board not go like, Octopussy? Are you kidding me?
Right? James Bond got away with some shit, man.
He did.
The next training montages show Joker working very closely with Pyle, who does actually seem to be improving. That is, until an inspection reveals Pyle has hidden a jelly donut in his footlocker. Hartman decides that collective punishment will work here, forcing the rest of the company to do exercises while Pyle eats that donut. Going forward, he will punish the company whenever Pyle makes a mistake.
Did you ever get anything like that?
Nope.
So there was never a group punishment for one person fucking up?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
At night, the company throws a blanket party for Pyle. They restrain Pyle in his rack while everyone takes turns beating his midsection with bars of soap wrapped in towels. This is their retaliation for being forced to work harder for his mistakes. And no, we didn't do that either.
Calm down. I'm not saying you. I'm saying in the military, because you called it a blanket party, so it sounds like this is a common...
We all knew what it was. We never did it. So I don't know how often it happened.
But it was enough that's a name for it, so it must happen quite a bit somewhere, obviously, in the armed services.
Yep. We see a lesson on how mass murderers learned how to shoot in the Marines. On Christmas, Hartman leads them in a round of Happy Birthday for Jesus. Private Joker notices that Pyle now speaks to his rifle in an affectionate yet scary way. While mopping the deck in the head, or mopping the floor in the bathroom for you fucking civilians.
Why is it called head?
Because that's where it was in the ship. In old ships, it was located near the head of the ship.
Wow, okay. Oh, I didn't know that. Interesting, okay.
Joker tells Private Cowboy about Pyle's rifle talk and posits that he should be Section 8'd out of the Marines. That would be the medical discharge I mentioned earlier.
Private Cowboy is played by Arliss Howard, who is seen on the show in To Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar. And I've seen in, appropriately enough, Natural Born Killers, and I've also seen him in Amistad.
I've seen him in The Lost World, Jurassic Park. Soon enough, the Marines are ready to graduate. They are read their next duty assignments, with most of them going to infantry units. Hartman is shocked to hear that Private Joker is going to be a combat journalist working for Stars and Stripes, the military propaganda newspaper. In boot camp, in any barracks, even after graduation, one recruit is always on fire watch. For their last night in the barracks, Joker draws that watch. He finds Pyle in the bathroom, talking to his rifle and loading live ammo. He tries to talk Pyle down, but fails. Rolls like a crit fail on his charisma check. Pyle stands at attention in the middle of the bathroom, in his underwear, and starts loudly reciting his general orders. I do not remember my general orders, but I fucking did when I left boot camp. This gets the attention of Hartman, who comes in and tries to scream Pyle into obedience. This doesn't work, and Pyle shoots him dead. Then Pyle puts the gun in his own mouth and blows his own brains out. Oh
boy, does he. Okay, I got a bunch of questions here.
Okay.
Number one, and I obviously you wouldn't have an answer for this, but I am just very curious because the other Marines do get up after the initial commotion, and then Hartman sends them all back to the barracks or the beds or whatever it's called. But then they hear the sergeant yelling at this guy, and then a gunshot, and then nobody comes running. Which you would think you would hear some voices either going like, "Holy shit, what happened?" Some may be running out, some may be running towards them. Nothing. It's like completely silent. Like, that seemed odd.
It sure seems odd. Almost like this is a movie written by Stanley Kubrick.
Should get more attention, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Kubrick does a great job making Vincent D'Onofrio look fucking insane.
Yep.
When the Matthew Modine's character comes in, Joker comes in and sees him there, and he says, "Hi," whatever the Joker's real name is. He looks, I generally for a second was scared. He really looked like, what? This dude is capable of anything right now. It was just wild. But I still was shocked when he actually shoots the sergeant. I did not see that coming at all. Even with him having the gun in his hand, of everything. Him killing himself, I could see. But I was really shocked when he shot. This is supposed to be based on this guy's actual experiences in the Marine Corps. I wonder if any drill sergeant ever has been shot.
I have no idea, Joe.
I would imagine it probably had to have happened at least once.
Pyle wasn't supposed to have access to live ammo that he could bring back to the barracks with him.
Sure, but he also wasn't supposed to bring back a jelly donut. That man obviously gets access to a lot of things.
Had a knack for bringing things back, yeah. So this is where the first movie ends.
Yes. Literally, folks, this is a film in unto itself. The movie could have ended there, and that would have been a complete picture.
And the rest of this goes pretty quick because it's a lot of shooting. So, apologies. Now we shift to Vietnam, where now Sergeant Joker sits with his friend Private First Class Rafterman outside of a cafe in Da Nang. They are approached by a prostitute, whose lines are famous, and I'm not going to repeat or clip because it's just stereotyping women in a foreign accent.
But I will say this very quickly. I did not know that's where Two Live Crew got that quote. I didn't know it was from this movie. The Me Who's So Horny thing.
And you do now.
I was shocked when I heard, like, oh, that's where they got that from. Because I hadn't seen the movie at the time, so I had no clue. I knew they took it from a movie, but I didn't realize it was this one.
While these two GIs negotiate payment for services, a Vietnamese man steals Rafterman's camera and runs to a friend waiting on a moped. Before hopping on, he turns back towards the GIs and does some martial arts stuff that Private Joker mocks. The thief and friend get away.
And Rafterman is played by Kevin Major Howard, who I've seen in Scarface. There were a couple of times in this picture where I flash back to Officer and the Gentleman. First, obviously, when the insults at the very beginning, especially when he says,
steers and queers.
Queers,
yeah.
Yes. Straight out from Officer and the Gentleman. And then when he does the how karate thing there, because that's also an Officer and the Gentleman. I don't think this picture ripped it off. I think if you were in the Vietnam or any sort of military service, you probably had similar things happen to you. I mean, just impossible to avoid stuff overlapping.
Yep. Back at Marine Corps Base Da Nang, Joker and Rafterman have a walk and talk about how they can't wait to kill some people. At a Stars and Stripes staff meeting, Lieutenant Lockhart gives notes to the writing staff on how to properly write propaganda, while dismissing the annual rumors that the enemy will be mounting a large offensive during the historically peaceful Tet holiday. Lieutenant Lockhart, and his fucking really handsome strong jaw, is played by John Terry, and I've seen him in Of Mice and Men.
Found him a bit attractive, did you there, George?
He was cute, yeah. That night, the rumors turn out to be true. On January 30th, 1968, North Vietnamese forces executed the largest military operation up to that point in the conflict, landing surprise attacks on over 100 targets. Ultimately, it was a tactical loss for the North Vietnamese, but it did sour the US on the Vietnam conflict in general and make us question whether or not we belong there at all.
Yeah, that's what people seem to forget. Technically, Americans won the Vietnam War in terms of overwhelming force and killing lots of people. We won that part. We lost the political part of Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
That's where America lost. It's like, hey, we don't want to be here no more.
Even specifically in the Tet Offensive, it got billed as this massive, loss for us. But we were surprised, but we recovered and, took back ground really fucking fast. But that part didn't get out.
Right.
I'm not super happy about anything in this war, but I would have appreciated some historical truth in reporting.
I think people just didn't want to hear it.
Yeah.
What people wanted is World War II.
Yeah.
And I know this because that's what Johnson, I remember quotes from Lyndon Johnson, because not that I'm an expert on Vietnam War, I'm not, but I just remember Lyndon Johnson talking about the war, and, stuff I've read in history books or whatever, and he seemed to be of this mindset that we are going to, I don't want to be the first person to lose a war, and everything's back to World War II with the Americans. Even today, we still bring up World War II to one war we won, apparently. Everything else has been shipped from there.
In the movie, we see Joker and Rafterman run to a foxhole by the front gate from which they machine gun down intruders. In the morning, there is destruction and debris, but the base in Da Nang got off relatively easily. Lockhart sends Joker up to Phu Bai, and Rafterman gets himself sent with him. On the helicopter ride up there, Rafterman has a hard time keeping his lunch down as he watches the gunner indiscriminately gun down civilians. When asked how he can shoot women and children, he says, "You just don't lead them as much." When I saw this movie the first time, that was fucking hilarious. Because I was a terrible human being.
You were also a young man. And as I said before, there is no such thing as an anti-war movie. There is no horror you can show in a movie where some teenage boy or young man is going to ooh, cool.
Yeah.
It's impossible. You just can't do it. The only way you can make a truly anti-war movie is you show it really boring. You make the war seem very, very dull. Then they're like, oh, I don't want to enjoy that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you got explosions and shooting people, guys get a goddamn hard on. Men are shit. We're terrible. We're terrible.
Yep.
And the younger we are, the more terrible we are.
And to be clear, that's not the fault of us being this gender. A lot goes into that. A lot of programming and indoctrination and cultural messaging goes into us being that at that age. After getting directions to where the fighting is, Joker and Raptorman catch up to Lieutenant Touchdown, who played football for Notre Dame before joining the war effort. This is the Lust Hog Squad, and Joker already knows someone here, former private, now Sergeant Cowboy. But we will introduce Lieutenant Touchdown first.
And he's played by Ed O. Ross, who we both seen in Dick Tracy and Lethal Weapon. And I've seen in The Cotton Club.
They take a detour to see some South Vietnamese civilians in a mass grave that were killed by the Viet Cong for not being communist. Joker gets some grief from a colonel about having "Born to Kill" written on his helmet while wearing a peace symbol pin on his lapel.
It is, that guy is obviously a dick, but he is right. That's kind of weird.
Yeah. It's fucking walking contradiction. For no fucking reason.
Other than it entertains him. That's why he's called the Joker. He's finding this stuff very amusing.
Mm-hmm. They catch up to Cowboy and his squad, taking a break with a dead Viet Cong soldier nearby. Here we meet one of those people that may have gotten Section 8'd out, but he didn't go ballistic and kill their drill instructor himself first. Animal Mother is played by Adam Baldwin. We've both seen him in Independence Day.
And I've seen him in DC Cab, a horrible comedy that starred the horrible Bill Maher. No one remembers it. Don't worry about it.
And I've seen him in My Bodyguard, Wyatt Earp, the TV show Firefly, and The Patriot. As they advance on the city of Hue, they take fire and Touchdown falls to a booby trap. After they take the city, the Marines are interviewed about their experiences in the war. A South Vietnamese soldier brings a prostitute by, and we get jokes about black people having large penises.
Well, it's no joke, buddy.
It's also not a universal truth.
How would you know? Go ahead. I dare you.
There are two ways I can answer this.
I know.
I'm not going to do either one.
No, I know you're not. That's why I said I dare you. I know you. I know what you can reference.
Well, one of them is a story that I believe you told on air.
Oh, that. I don't think that. I think I'm just. Whatever. We don't need to get it. Anyway, when you were getting your prostitutes, George, were they big on size and like, oh, we only wanted this big, not that big, or
no,
that wasn't negotiated?
Nope, that was not a concern. The one time that I procured the services of a prostitute.
Okay, one time, wink, wink.
No, literally exactly one time. Later that night, when their squad leader bends down to pick up a teddy bear, it turns out to be a booby trap and kills him. This makes Cowboy the squad leader.
I know it's a war going on here, and obviously this is way back in the past, but man, they really should have had I mean, it's weird because we both watch MASH, and we know during Vietnam, ostensibly, granted, these guys were stationed in the army hospital, but they did have psychiatrists.
MASH was Korea.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. If this MASH unit had occasionally bring in a psychiatrist, these guys seem to have nothing. And it's like, wow, do they need it?
Yeah. Dr. Sidney Freeman, one of my favorite fucking characters on that show.
Because he was the most reasonable person every time.
Yep. My favorite quote is, depression is anger turned inwards. Anger turned sideways is Hawkeye.
No, he had some good lines. But yeah, boy, did they need therapy. I mean, just the stuff that happened in boot camp, let alone when actually seeing people blown up, and then they just keep going. How can you not be fucked up after something like that?
So they come to a choke point. Cowboy sends someone on a recon mission. A sniper takes him down. Everybody opens fire, but they don't know what they're shooting at. Eventually, the squad medic, against orders, goes to rescue the guy, but then himself gets shot. Duh!
Yeah, there is a lot of bad discipline here.
Which, like, we get warned about this, I hear it every year, because for confined space awareness, because there are multiple stories of, like, somebody goes silent and falls down in a confined space, somebody goes in to rescue them, then falls down, then a third person goes in to rescue them and falls down, like, and they all die. Because they think, oh, I can hold my breath long enough. Or, oh, I'm not going to get shot by the sniper when I go out to drag this other guy who just got shot by the sniper who is looking at that spot very specifically and keeps shooting the guy on the ground.
It sort of reminded me of, you remember we were doing Saturday Night Fever, and I was telling the story, I was doing the history section, and I was reading the story about these guys in the bar, and the brother gets shot, and the other brother runs after the guy who shoots the guy, his brother in the bar, and then he gets shot.
Yeah. Stop running after the people with guns. Stop running into the line of fire. It's not a good idea.
It's not going to work.
After more aimless firing, Animal Mother takes a different route and deduces that there is just one sniper who finishes off the two already wounded when the medic tries to point in the sniper's direction. The squad moves up to where Animal Mother is, but the sniper gets a shot off and takes out Cowboy. Now, Animal Mother takes command, and they spread out, infiltrating the building where the sniper is. Joker finds it as a teenage girl. He'd forgotten to reload his gun, so she gets him pinned behind a pillar. Raptorman takes her out. The rest of the squad converges on that point, and they discuss what to do because she's still breathing. Joker executes her, and everyone tells him that's hardcore.
Well, it takes a long time for him to do it.
Yeah.
He's just standing and looking at her, and it goes, a good 3 minutes?
While she is looking at him, it goes, shoot me! Shoot me! Shoot me!
She wants to be shot.
Yeah. The final scene of the movie is the squad walking past a burning city singing the Mickey Mouse March. The end.
Whew. That was very fast and very brief, but man, it is one long, brutal movie.
Yeah.
And it starts brutal.
Yep.
I've seen very few films where just right off the top, Jesus Christ. And without violence even. Oh, well, the language is violent, but the opening minutes, I've never got so captured into a film from the very start where it's just language. No explosions, no one's getting shot, and it's straight up this monster. Well, I don't think we're supposed to think of it as a monster, but maybe we are. What do you think we are supposed to think of the gunnery sergeant? Another gunnery sergeant, he's a sergeant, drill sergeant?
He's a gunnery sergeant. Sergeant. Well, the gunnery sergeant is his rank. Drill sergeant is his job.
Got it, okay.
We are supposed to see him for what he is, a drill instructor. He's supposed to be what you face when you go to boot camp. Everybody knows that you go to boot camp and you get yelled at. That's what the movies do. That's what they're preparing you for. We are not supposed to see him as a hero or a villain. I think his whole thing about, the clock tower shooter and Lee Harvey Oswald being Marines, maybe not the best way to make that point. But he played the part really fucking well. The acting in this film was phenomenal.
100%, yeah.
If we say this movie did not work, it is not because of the acting.
No. Everyone puts in a superb performance. I was just blown away by it. No pun intended. Blown away by everybody. I still can't get over that whole scene of him just brutalizing everyone. Evidently, some Marine recruiters would show it to people who come in and want to be Marine and then ask them afterwards, are you sure you still want to join?
Nowadays is like a pump fake because it's not that bad.
No. But can you imagine someone seeing this and go, oh yeah, well, I mentioned that earlier. I still can't believe people saw this and thought, well, that's cool.
Yeah, I didn't see this until I was in the Navy already, solidly in the Navy.
What did you think of it when you were in the Navy?
I loved it. I fucking loved this movie, Joe. I thought it was fantastic.
Even the drill sergeant part, even though you didn't experience that?
I thought it was hilarious.
It's weird because I also thought it was hilarious and I felt ashamed that I did.
Yeah, exactly. It makes you feel dirty for thinking it's funny. Yeah, it's that kind of movie. Kubrick's really fucking good at that.
I didn't read how much Vincent D'Onofrio was acting or if he was really laughing in that scene. Mm-hmm. If I was him, as I was one of the soldiers, I would also be like, I wouldn't know what to do. I never have anyone just screaming stuff out this, acting like this. I would just be like, I'd do everything I could to try and not laugh. It would be so hard. I can't, my mind, just it blowing my mind, dude. Wow, you are so goddamn vulgar. I can't take it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we gotta answer it. Do you think this still works?
I don't want to say yes, but I'm going to say yes. It is one of, if not the definitive movies about the Vietnam conflict and the military structure surrounding it. The trauma of that war, the trauma of the training for that war, we are still suffering that. We know that the actor who played the gunnery sergeant, that played the drill instructor, he deliberately overplayed it. He said in interviews, he was more vulgar than what Marine drill instructors actually are because he thought Kubrick liked that. And he was right.
Yeah.
But I think it worked because it's a fantastically told story and the acting was fantastic and the war was a fucking hellhole. And this movie portrays that fairly well.
Yeah. If I had any major criticism for the picture, and it's not the language or anything, because they definitely talk that way. I mean, people straight up call a guy an N-word right to his face before he takes off with a prostitute and stuff. I mean, there's stuff in this film that if I wouldn't be able to survive it. I wouldn't have been able to survive boot camp. I wouldn't have been able to survive the war. I would have shot the gunnery sergeant day one. The moment that man had choked me, I would have promised you, I would have thought of any way possible to kill him. You and I have similar temperaments. And if someone is acting that way to me, I would lose my shit. I mean, you yelled at me once about something and I got pissed off. God help you. You treat me like you're doing that picture. I'm going to do everything in my part to try and kill you. I can't take it.
Yep.
I just could not do it. So, definitely not for me. But if I had any sort of major criticism, it'd be like, it's two films. It's a disjointed picture. If one is the basic training film, and then is the Vietnam War film.
It takes months to years to get from private to sergeant. And it's one scene to the next where Joker is a private and then a sergeant.
Yeah.
We miss a lot of character development. We miss a lot of growth, whatever. But, at the same time, I'm not sure we needed to see it.
Yeah. I mean, look. Does the film still work? Is it still as powerful as it was in 1987? I gotta say yes.
Yeah.
I was drawn in. From the moment the drill sergeant comes, shows himself. When it initially started, it seemed like, it's just gonna be a cliche because it's playing music, whatever the hit tune is, over the credits. And then suddenly this guy comes in and oh my God. And then I'm just captured from there. So yeah, I have to say it still works for all its vulgarities. And I think Kubrick generally was making an anti-war movie, but
he was trying to.
He was trying to.
The problem is you can't.
Yeah, I was captured. I mean, maybe it's just also a dude thing. How many women will respond to this? Because everyone I've read about this has all been men. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious how women look at this and go like, what? Because we don't see basic training, or at least not too many pictures where basic training for women.
We saw that in Officer and a Gentleman.
Yeah, okay, it was also a gentleman. I was also thinking Private Benjamin, which isn't, but the woman is nowhere near as abused as the guys are in this picture.
Yeah.
Well, no one of any of the films we saw is as abused as the guys are in this picture.
Yep.
I mean, even in Shawshank Redemption, I don't think they were as abused.
No, and that's a fucking prison.
That's a prison. At least in terms of the language, some other things happen are pretty abusive. Anyway, but yeah, I have to agree with you. It's possible to say this doesn't still work. It totally does. I was captured from the moment it happened to the end, even though there were some cliches in it, and obviously some of the way they spoke I was not in love with. But man, it's a powerful picture.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty. So it works.
So it still works.
I was not expecting us to both say that because I just didn't. But yeah, it does.
It's difficult to say it's not, you know? I mean, look how we're both brought into it. Mm-hmm. I mean, you've seen it before, but I've never seen it. I was like, wow.
Yeah, I knew better.
All right, my friend, let's move on from there. So this was a Patron's Reward episode for our longest serving and highest paying patron of all time, Aaron. He's got 2 more movies coming up soon, too. Thank you, Aaron, for your support. It means the world to us.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. It does mean, like, the world to us. And if we're wondering why we're doing multiple picks, it's because he hasn't, like, pressed the button on his patron reward. But he's been that patron for 3 more. Like, we did some stuff for him year 1. We haven't done anything for the last 3 years, so he's catching up.
He's due.
He's due.
He's more than due.
And next week, another Aaron pick. We'll be talking about Down Periscope from 1996.
Aaron, did you ever see a movie that was not military based?
No, but he was in the Navy.
I gathered. I pretty much assumed that. I gotta guess that, George. Man likes his military movies. Oh my God. Okay, yeah, sure. Whatever you want, buddy. All right, that's enough of this. I'm Joe Dixon. Thanks for listening.
And I'm George Romaka. Thanks for listening indeed, because if a podcast drops and there's no one around to hear it, it's just another collection of ones and zeros that doesn't matter.
Boys and girls from far and near, you're welcome as can be. MICKEYMOUSE.
You've been listening to Does This Still Work? Produced by Joe Dixon and George Romaka. The hosts can be reached via social media, email, or the contact page at dtswpod.com. Be good to yourself and others, because that still works.
There is not much left of the summary. So feel free to chime in with anything.
Okay.